agenda to put the unvaccinated away into quarantine camps, and they were going to round people up and put them into camps.
If there are people who are non-compliant, there are definitely laws and public health powers that can quarantine people in mandatory settings.
I think regional quarantine facilities are going to be needed into the future. We'll also need it for unvaccinated people.
Or you could track people, put bracelets on their arms, have police and other setups to ensure quarantine is undertaken.
Police officers blocked my driveway. I walked out and I said, "What's going on? Are you guys testing me for COVID? What's happening?" They said, "No, you're getting taken away and you have no choice. You're going to Howard Springs." So I just said, "Look, I don't consent to this. I don't understand why I can't just self-isolate at home like a lot of other people are doing." And they just said, "We've just been told from higher up where to take you, and that's all that there is."
I'm doing a story tonight that I wanted to debunk these FEMA camps. I'm tired of hearing. You know about them?
Sure.
I'm tired of hearing. I wanted to debunk them. Well, we've now for several days done research on them. I can't debunk them.
FEMA camps, mandatory quarantine, involuntary isolation, being taken from your home by the police against your will, locked up in a small prison cell, separated from all your beloved ones for an unknown period of time. Millions of perfectly healthy people who had no symptoms of any illness whatsoever were arrested and locked up in quarantine camps around the world. And that was only the initial stage of something that would have become humanity's worst nightmare. Those who tried to escape from these quarantine camps were aggressively hunted down by the police.
Good morning. We start with breaking news out of Darwin, where 3 people have escaped from the Howard Springs COVID quarantine facility. Talia Sav is there for us. Talia, good morning. There's a search underway right now.
Yes, that's right, Davina. Good morning to you. We've been told the trio scaled the fence in the early hours of this morning. Police receiving reports around 4:40 a.m. Now, major police checkpoints have been set up around Howard Springs for the past several hours. As you can see in these pictures, they've been conducting thorough searches in car boots, checking vehicle registrations, cars and buses alike.
Quarantine camps are a reality in Washington state. I'm here at Camp Solomon Schechter, normally a Jewish summer camp, but Washington State Department of Health has contracted it out to house people who are in isolation and quarantine because they are ill or have had close contact. The code is now also on the books in Washington state, allowing local health officials to isolate or quarantine someone against their will.
It's horrible. It's a horrible feeling. You feel like you're in prison. You feel like you've done something wrong. It's inhumane what they're doing. Like you are so small. They just overpower you, and you're literally nothing. It's like you do what we say, or you're in trouble. We'll lock you up for longer.
Hundreds of FEMA camps have been built all around the United States. In the state of Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill that says that any unvaccinated person can be locked up in a quarantine camp. The bill also states that any means necessary may be used to forcibly vaccinate anyone. The CDC developed the shielding approach, which allows for the detaining of large numbers of people for long periods of time against their will. The Readiness Exercise 1984 Bravo was a classified scenario and drill developed by the US federal government to detain large numbers of United States residents in the event of a national emergency. According to the Australian government, all of this is part of what they call a new world order.
The new world order, our army comes marching in, partnering with police to help enforce the country's tough new quarantine laws. Plus, Hotel Hell reveal what life is really like inside Sydney's isolation hotels as guests discover the service is anything but 5-star.
Today is the first full day of the new world order. Outdoor gatherings are limited to 2 people. Exercise is allowed, but no further than a 10-kilometre radius from your home.
This is a world pandemic. It's a 1 in 100-year event. So you can expect that we will have transmission from time to time, and that's just the way it is. We've got to accept that this is the new world order. We've got to accept that this is the new world order.
We will be looking at what contact tracing looks like in the new world order. Yes, it will be pubs and clubs and other things if we have a positive case there.
For decades, leaders around the world have been discussing and announcing this new world order.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order.
And now is a time when things are shifting. There's going to be a new world order out there, and we've got to lead it.
With such concrete proposals and ideas of how we can really create, I would say, a new world order.
Never before has a new world order had to be assembled from so many different perceptions or on so global a scale.
This would be the time, because you really need to bring China into the creation of a new world order.
It was, however, consistently labeled as a conspiracy theory in a desperate attempt to blind the mind of the public for it. Meanwhile, world leaders kept preparing for it.
Nothing less than a new world order. This is the pledge of the world's most powerful leaders, representing 90% of the global economy.
And the 2020 pandemic, with all its tyranny, was openly declared to be this long-awaited new world order.
Die Polizei ist gerade da.
Polizei! Ich will die Hände sehen! Auf den Boden, runter beide! Runter auf den Boden!
This week, a Kenyan policeman enforcing the country's coronavirus curfew was charged with murdering a 13-year-old boy. At least 7 people were killed in the first 5 nights of the restrictions brought in Kenya.
comes marching in, partnering with police to help enforce the country's tough new quarantine laws.
We've got to accept that this is the new world order.
Interestingly, at the very start of the 2020 pandemic, the United Nations suddenly launched a new website, which was called United Nations New World Order, with this screen as a bold statement. The World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum publicly stated that it was their full intention to make this tyrannical New World Order permanent.
I want to be straight with you. There will be no return to the old normal for the foreseeable future. I repeat, there will be no return to the old normal for the foreseeable future.
So people assume we are just going back to the good old world which we had, and everything will be normal again in how we are used to normal, in the old fashion. This is, let's say, fiction. It will not happen.
So if their publicly stated plan was to make this permanent, why then did it stop? What happened? Who stopped this nefarious plot? We get the answer from a very fascinating man that I met in California. His name is Chad Vivas, and he's one of the most exceptional and courageous classic artists of our time.
This is what you painted, one of your paintings. But then this one, you painted this one too. They're life-size paintings almost. And then you painted this. Progress is almost done, but I mean the detail, the accuracy, the perfection. And then you painted this. You're an intelligent guy, you're a very gifted guy. You could use your time for 5 million other things. Tell the world why. Do you spend your life painting these topics?
Yeah, I mean, Trump stopped the New World Order. He's stopping the New World Order right now. And the biggest proof to me is seeing warp speed stop the FEMA camps. And the biggest proof to me is seeing warp speed stop the FEMA camps. As someone who's known about the New World Order and the FEMA camps and the whole scamdemic agenda for 17 years, it's clear as day. And I know a lot of people that just found out about the scamdemic in 2020. They just found out about the New World Order then. It's very scary and it's very overwhelming. It's a lot to learn all at once. And I can see how people might think it looked like Trump is in on it. He released the vaccine. But releasing it quickly is exactly what stopped the FEMA camps. And the fact that we're here today, still unvaccinated, not in the camps, is like just the proof to the success of this strategy. Yeah, so this is a print of a drawing I did in 2012, or I think 2011 or 2012 at some point, and you can see I painted the New World Order police on their badges, because at the time we all thought we were going to be carried away and arrested and taken to the quarantine camps. And here you have like the spirit of the earth whispering into some reason and for morality into the human spirit and awakening.
So let me go to the title. You Cannot Arrest the Awakening of Humanity by Chad Vivas. Vivas?
Vivas, yeah.
Vivas. You cannot arrest the awakening of humanity. This young guy represents you. It represents the people in that time.
Yeah, humanity.
More than 10 years ago, 12, 13 years ago.
17, yeah.
You knew about the New World Order. New World Order police. You knew their plan was to arrest everyone who was dissenting.
Refuse the vaccine, yeah.
That was the plan.
If there are people who are non-compliant, there are definitely laws and public health powers that can quarantine people in mandatory settings.
I think regional quarantine facilities are going to be needed into the future. We'll also need it for unvaccinated people.
We've just been told from higher up where to take you, and that's all that there is.
The New World Order, our army comes marching in, partnering with police to help enforce the country's tough new quarantine laws.
What is this New World Order? Why is it so dangerous? Who's behind it?
It's basically the wealthiest elites in the entire world that own all the world's resources. They think the world's overpopulated, and they think there's too many of us, which is not true. You can prove it. Basically, they wanted to depopulate the world by more than 80%. As you can see on the Georgia Guidestones, it says maintain humanity below 500 million. And that's a lot less than 8 billion people on the planet that they want to achieve and strive for. And you have, they say it openly. There's a video of David Rockefeller speaking out at the UN talking about overpopulation and how we need to stabilize the population.
Which raised the specter of an alarming and possibly catastrophic disaster to the biosphere we live in. The world's average life expectancy has increased from 46 years in 1950s to 63 years today. The world population that has risen during the same short period of time geometrically to almost 6 billion people and could easily exceed 8 billion by the year 2020. The negative impact of population growth on all of our planetary ecosystems is becoming appallingly evident. Unless nations will agree to work together to tackle these cross-border challenges posed by population growth, the prospects for a decent life on our planet will be threatened.
Bill Gates talking about we need to, on his TED Talk, how we can bring the world's population down with new vaccines, and it's too many people.
First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Rockefeller's created the Population Council, and these people openly state that the world's overpopulated, and then they also happen to be the biggest proponents of vaccines and chemical injections into people. Yeah. So their plan was to force vaccinate humanity. They were going to create a pandemic type scenario where they needed to scare the public into thinking they need to accept these new totalitarian measures to keep them safe. It's the same thing as the Patriot Act. Oh, we need to take away your freedoms to keep you safe. And their plan was to roll out a mass vaccine campaign. And this is something that I was learning in 2007 and 2008. And we all thought it was going to happen with swine flu back then. And what they were going to do is there was laws being introduced at the time that if you didn't take the vaccine, there would be enforced with police presence. And if you refused the vaccine, you would be put onto a bus and taken to a quarantine camp. And they were known as FEMA camps. And these FEMA camps all over the country. And basically, if you didn't take the vaccine, you would never be heard from again. You would just disappear. And then they had this whole new form of society that they had ready for the whole world. And it was outlined in a document that's now referred to as the Lockstep document. But I think it was called Scenarios and Technology for the Future, released by the Rockefeller Foundation, where they talk about a more tighter form of top-down authoritarian government. There was going to be biometric surveillance, digital IDs, which we later saw with Bill Gates and his ID 2020. And it's crazy because this is what they call you a conspiracy theorist for talking about this, even though it's public information. You can go to MIT's own website. They talk about Bill Gates' project to create quantum dot dye tattoos, where they were going to create literal barcode tattoos where they would be scannable with a smartphone that stores your vaccine and your medical history, and it would be connected to a digital ID, to your Facebook, to your driver's license, your social security, and it was going to be implemented with vaccines. You would get a barcode tattoo. And this is everything that's been talked about for a long time. Patriots like Bill Cooper, who was actually killed for speaking out against this. He wrote a book called Behold a Pale Horse. He was a naval intelligence officer with Q clearance that became a whistleblower and started speaking out on everything he found out.
What is Q clearance?
Q clearance is the highest level of clearance basically that exists in the government. So Bill Cooper had Q clearance. He had the highest access to all the top secret and classified information, and he was horrified by what he saw, and he became a whistleblower speaking out against the New World Order and how they had this plan to depopulate humanity and round up dissenters into camps. They were going to suspend the Constitution, use continuity of government as a way to suspend the Constitution and round people up into camps.
Massachusetts, the legislature is acting rapidly on a bill updating what the state can do at a public health emergency. That bill has languished on Beacon Hill for some time, but with the flu outbreak, it's now racing through the legislature. NECN's Josh Brugadier is at the State House in Boston tonight. Josh?
RD, the state Senate passed this bill, Bill 2028 today. They did so unanimously, and it gives the governor and the health commissioner the power to act in the public's interest in case in any kind of medical emergency.
Timing sped up a hearing and ultimately unanimous Senate approval of the Pandemic and Disaster Preparation and Response Bill in Massachusetts. The bill gives the Public Health Commissioner the discretion to respond to an outbreak like the kind going on in Mexico, to close or evacuate buildings, enter private property, isolate or quarantine people, and to get and distribute meds and vaccines. The bill also protects healthcare workers from liability.
Josh, any penalty if you don't follow the emergency declaration rules?
It can actually get to be a pretty severe penalty because for each day someone didn't follow a rule, for example, if somebody was asked to be quarantined and they decided not to follow that, it could be a fine of up to $1,000 per day they didn't follow, and also up to 30 days in prison.
Josh Brugadier on Beacon Hill tonight. Thank you.
So as a youth, I was just learning this as a 22-year-old thing, and it's something that can just really rattle you to the core, where it just change all your life priorities from pursuing a career, the type of thing you're supposed to be doing at 20-something-year-old, and to actually realizing you need to prepare for this plan that they're going to roll out. And it's pretty daunting. I mean, I had panic attacks at that age learning about this, because it's such a terrifying prospect. And at the time we had Bush, we had Obama. There was no hope. We didn't have a Trump. We had nothing. There was no hope. It was a completely bleak, terribly hopeless situation. And it was a very scary time because you had the Patriot Act, and they were passing laws that they could disappear people without due process and arrest you as a terrorist or as under the Patriot Act. There was no more, they would take away your rights. So back then it was such a terrifying thing, and you sounded crazy trying to talk about this, because back then nobody believed me when I tried to tell people and sound the alarm. Hey, they want to create a fake pandemic. They want to force vaccines on people. Bill Gates wants to lower the population. No one believed me.
No.
Everyone thought I was totally nuts. No one believed me.
No.
Everyone thought I was totally nuts. I mean, and even when I first met my wife, she didn't believe me. She's like, wow, that's really out there. And I didn't push it on her, but when it finally happened, a lot of people in my life that I told about this, when the scamdemic came around, 2020, when it happened, people were like, oh my God, this is what you were telling me about for 15 years. People were like, oh my God, this is what you were telling me about for 15 years. So it really finally happened. But something incredible happened because, we have a president like Trump who opposed mandates. He opposed war. He opposed the military-industrial complex. And the fact that somebody would oppose mandates was unthinkable. It doesn't matter whether you're Republican, Democrat, they both agree on the war. They might disagree on smaller surface issues, but they both agree on war. They both agree on mandatory vaccines. You have somebody like Trump coming in, opposing the wars, opposing military-industrial complex, exposing the fake news, which was unthinkable in itself, and people take that for granted, and it's become a meme. The fake news, the fake news. But that's a really big deal, because the Mockingbird CIA media is their biggest arm of propaganda. It's a propaganda machine, and that is how they brainwash the masses to follow an opinion. I mean, if you control all the news corporations, you control the opinion of the country.
I'm trained in media. I have worked with radio and television, newspapers, magazines, books, websites for decades. I'm from Europe. Back in Europe, that's what pointed my attention to Trump. I have never been interested in politics because I knew it's all clowns. They're all criminals. They always lie as their first nature. There is no honest politician, that's what I thought. But as a media expert, I saw how all the mainstream news media all around the world, in Europe and in America and Asia and Africa, they all were deployed simultaneously to incite an unprecedented, I mean, this has never happened in the history of this world, to make sure that everybody living on the earth would hate Trump. And I know from my background in media that they only attack their enemies and they will always praise their servants. So when people say Trump is part of this blah blah, I'm like, use your brain, dear people. These guys have deployed everything they could to destroy him, to prevent him from becoming president in 2016. Trump has exposed, and I'm going to point at this hammer here, the hammer of Thor. He has used the hammer of the word of his mouth, the truth, to smash the #1 grip of these elites on all of mankind, which is the news media.
And I want you all to know that we are fighting the fake news. It's fake, phony, fake. A few days ago, I called the fake news the enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people. Don't be rude.
Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude. No, I'm not going to give you a question. I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you stay categorical?
You are fake news.
Sir.
And we're running against a very dishonest media. The public doesn't believe you people anymore.
And it's frankly disgusting the way the press is able to write whatever they want to write. The fake news says I'm not campaigning very hard. I say they are stupid and corrupt.
You know, the press is really the biggest problem of all. The fake news, I call it, is the biggest problem of all.
Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And together, we will send Joe Biden and the fake news media. There's a lot of people back there. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. I don't know. What do you want? Do you want something when you're there? French fries. I'll tell you what. How about if we gave you some French fries? All right. There you go. Are you? That's sort of a bribe, but I think a bribe for a buck is okay, right? I'm going to get you some French fries. Somebody come up here and take them. Let's get them some French fries, okay? These for the fake news. People don't want fake news.
So the fact that Trump was already waking up, people to the tyranny and the lies of the mainstream media is a really big deal, because back then, conservative, Christian, Republican people used to be the scariest people back then, because you had George Bush and the Patriot Act and Dick Cheney.
What is the Patriot Act?
The Patriot Act is when they used the events of 9/11, which they helped create with Israel, and that's a whole other story, but they used the Patriot Act to say, hey, to protect your freedoms, we need to take them away. So they took away your Fourth Amendment, they took away your privacy, they took away so many of your constitutional rights where they can just arrest you without due process. The Patriot Act was one of the first big steps into removing the constitutional rights of Americans. Back then, conservative Christian Republicans were the scariest people, because these were the people that were being brainwashed to go along with the Patriot Act, to go along with removing your rights, and they were supporting the wars for George Bush. And then when you have Trump come along, he woke up the conservative Christian Republican base of our country.
Masks, no masks, everything, you can do all you want, but you still need help from the boss. We need help from the boss. That's what happened. We need help. Yeah, we need help. It's all right to say it. Now, they'll criticize me for that. How dare he say that? How dare he say that? No, I'll say it. I'll say it. I'll say it. Somebody said to me the other day, you're the most famous person in the world by far. I said, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. They said, yes, you are. I said, no. They said, who's more famous? I said, Jesus Christ. I'm not taking any chances. I'm not going to have an argument. Hey, I'm not having any arguments. Jesus Christ. I'm not going to take any chances. I'll give it, I guarantee. And let me look up and I'll say, and it's not even close.
Wow. And this is the majority of the country. So he woke up America, the majority of the country is conservative, Christian, Republican Americans, and he woke them up to the fake news media. Don't believe the news, they're lying to you. The wars are all based on lies. Bush lied. These are all just the military-industrial complex. He started speaking out at the base, root issues of everything, and it woke up the majority of the country. And then now you have conservative Christian Republicans now awake to the New World Order. It's become common knowledge. And that was just unthinkable back then.
Wow.
And it's incredible to see how 2020 has come along and it's woken up the entire public to what their real plans are.
I want to insert a brilliant painting Chad made about Bill Gates and the New World Order. He posted this on X and wrote, "As hopeless as the looming New World Order was in 2008, I prayed every day for over a decade that someone in a high office would do something. God answered the world's prayers by bringing us the Trump fifth generation warfare operation. Now, thanks to people like President Trump and General Flynn, we can truly be fearless to speak out without as drastic a level of risk there was back then. That's why I finally made this drawing."
And then we come to warp speed. What was the real plan with the pandemics, with the lockdowns, and why did Trump release those vaccines?
Yeah, I mean, people don't even have any idea what Trump stopped from happening with warp speed. They needed to create a great reset. And this thing they used to call the New World Order, that used to be like a theory, and it was kind of unverified, although you could verify it yourself by looking into it. They started saying openly with the Great Reset. They put it on the World Economic Forum Twitter page. You'll own nothing, you'll be happy. We need to reset the world system. I mean, they started becoming really bold and openly saying it.
8 predictions for the world in 2030 by the World Economic Forum. You will own nothing, and you'll be happy. Whatever you want, you will rent. And it'll be delivered by drone. Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better.
So what they needed is they needed a destroyed economy. They needed wars to destroy the economy. That's one of the biggest things. They create camouflage to destroy the economy and to reset society. They've done it many times with World War I, World War II. They created a step toward world government with the UN and the World Health Organization. And Trump defunded the World Health Organization, which was something that I was very aware of back in 2008 with the swine flu. They were pushing the forced vaccines, and Trump removed funding from the WHO. That was unheard of.
I'm instructing my administration to halt funding of the World Health Organization while a review is conducted to assess the World Health Organization's role in severely mismanaging and covering up the spread of the coronavirus. Everybody knows what's going on there.
The significance of President Donald Trump defunding the World Health Organization is absolutely unfathomable, because this private organization is at the very heart of the New World Order. Their plan was to use pandemics as the excuse to destroy the world economy through many years of lockdowns and remove all rights, freedoms and private possessions from humanity. A Dutch government virologist from the World Health Organization said on Dutch national television that the WHO has had a plan for a long time to have a decade of pandemics from 2020 to 2030.
If I listen carefully to what you've been saying for years, the probability of a second pandemic is very high.
Yes, there is consensus on that. That has also been in the World Health Organization's 10-year plan for some time. So that said, prepare yourself, the next 10 years, there's going to be a major infectious disease crisis. Well, this was year 1. So,
Trump defunding the World Health Organization and ending the membership of the United States was a devastating catastrophe for the New World Order.
So when 2020 came along, it was like, oh my God, here it is. They're really doing it. They pulled the trigger and they're going for it. This is their big plan.
Yes.
And so here we go. All these people that I knew that used to think I was crazy, now they were like, oh my God, this is everything you were talking about. This is what Chad was talking about. They're doing it. People started coming to me asking questions like, what's happening? What are they going to do? So what they wanted to happen is they wanted everybody locked down. They wanted the lockdown, totalitarian, authoritarian society, as we all saw. They started introducing authoritarian measures, telling you where you can go, when you're allowed to go outside, how you can breathe. The government doesn't have the right to restrict your breathing and give you a dress code for your face. That is so overtly totalitarian and just inflicts upon human rights in just the most blatant way, like to restrict your breathing. It's ridiculous. But so what they wanted to do is they wanted us locked down for 6 to 12 years. And you had Anthony Fauci and Gates and all these people saying, it's going to take 6 to 12 years at least for a new vaccine, and this is going to be the new normal. This is the new normal. New normal meant New World Order. This is the New World Order.
The New World Order, our army comes marching in, partnering with police to help enforce the country's tough new quarantine laws.
Today is the first full day of the New World Order. Outdoor gatherings are limited to 2 people.
So we've got to accept that this is the New World Order.
We will be looking at what contact tracing looks like in the New World Order.
You're going to have a totalitarian society, and everyone needs to accept it because it's going to be a while before we can create a new vaccine. And it won't be safe to open up and go into open society until we have the vaccine. And as we know, the lockdowns were destroying the economy. For some reason, all these mom and pop stores and grocery stores and hardware stores, everyone had to close down. But Walmart, Home Depot, same kind of store can stay open. So there was a transfer of wealth happening between small businesses and big corporations. And a big transfer of wealth did happen, but it was gonna be complete.
Yeah.
Like there would be no surviving small businesses left. Every single shred of the economy would have been destroyed. And there would be no more functioning economy left. Nobody in business, everyone would be destitute. And everyone would be begging for help, for a nanny state. So that's what they do. They create problem, reaction, solution. So they had a solution that they were going to roll out, and it was going to be the Great Reset, the New World Order. You were going to have a barcode tattoo to be safe, so that you can have your vaccine passport scanned with a smartphone. And if you didn't take the vaccine, you'll be taken to a quarantine camp and never heard from again. Yes. And the CDC had documents out. They called it the shielding approach. They called them green zones. They were these quarantine camps, and they talk about these people. I mean, I'll show you the documents, but they said they're going to need psychological help for loss of movement and freedom. I mean, they openly say that they were going to involuntarily quarantine people. So by Trump rushing the vaccine at warp speed, what it did is it ended their excuse for the lockdowns, and that ended their excuse to destroy the economy and to finish the transfer of wealth, which would have been the nail in the coffin. So the other thing of what it did is it forced it to be released under EUA, Emergency Use Authorization. They could not legally force it because they needed it to be FDA approved so that it could be enforced door to door with police enforcement, and otherwise you'd be taken to a quarantine camp. So by Trump rushing the vaccine at warp speed, it ended their excuse for the lockdowns. It stopped them from being able to finish the transfer of wealth, and it forced them to release it under EUA so it could not be physically forced. He also packed the courts with constitutional judges. So the judges that knocked down the mask mandates for airline travels and that knocked down Biden's unconstitutional workplace vaccine mandate, those were Trump-appointed judges. Those mandates that Biden installed were not able to stick. There's a multifaceted death knell to their plan. Trump tried to tell people to take hydroxychloroquine. He tried to tell people about ivermectin. He cured himself without a vaccine. He told people hydroxychloroquine cures this flu.
And I hope they use the hydroxychloroquine, and they can also do it with Z-Pak, subject to your doctor's approval, and all of that. And one of the reasons that I keep talking about hydroxychloroquine is that the question that nobody ever asks, and the question that I most hate the answer to, is what happens if you do have a ventilator? What are your chances? And I just hope that hydroxychloroquine wins, coupled with perhaps the Z-Pak, as we call it. But hydroxychloroquine, try it if you'd like. It will be wonderful. It'll be so beautiful. It'll be a gift from heaven if it works. And the other thing that we bought a tremendous amount of is the hydroxychloroquine, which I think, as you know, it's a great malaria drug. It's worked unbelievably. It's a powerful drug on malaria. And there are signs that it works on this, some very strong signs.
And what did they do? They responded by making it illegal. They made it illegal. You couldn't even prescribe it, even though it's a known medication that was used for 50 years plus, very safely. So Trump is up against a weaponized media that's going to manipulate anything he says and make it into some type of nefarious thing. And the thing I was going to say is that the people that were demanding a vaccine, there was no stopping it. There was no stopping a vaccine from coming out because people were demanding it. I see people to this day at the gym wearing a mask. They can't even breathe. And it's like, I'm looking at a traumatized victim that's been like tortured. It's like, it's psychological abuse. And so people were so traumatized with psychological abuse, mass formation psychosis, they would just believe anything and they needed it to feel safe. So there was no stopping. If Trump tried to stop a vaccine, that only plays into their agenda to keep the lockdowns. So he had to release the vaccine to people that wanted it. But what we had is we had unprecedented that a president for the first time ever opposed mandates. He never mandated the vaccine. Not only did he not mandate it, he said people should never be forced.
They want to restart the COVID hysteria so they can justify more lockdowns, more censorship. These are bad people. These are sick people we're dealing with. But to every COVID tyrant who wants to take away our freedom, hear these words: we will not comply. So don't even think about it. We will not shut down our schools. We will not accept your lockdowns. We will not abide by your mask mandates. And we will not tolerate your vaccine mandates.
And I'll not give 1 penny to any school that has a vaccine mandate or a mask mandate.
If you have a vaccine mandate, from kindergarten through college, you don't get anything. You don't get anything. I will also continue my long record of standing up to Big Pharma by creating a special presidential commission to investigate what is causing the decades-long increase in childhood diseases, autoimmune disorders, autism, obesity, infertility, and other chronic health problems.
The mandates are a disaster for this country. It's causing another big part of, when you look at what's happening with the economy, the mandates are just absolutely decimating our economy. And then they do the mandates, which is terrible. Shouldn't do it.
Would you ever do anything like that?
No, and they shouldn't have done it either.
If you were president, would you say to federal employees, particularly in education and the military, you have to get vaxxed? Would you have that mandate?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't say to anybody you have to. When I was president, there was no talk about mandates or anything. Everybody wanted the vaccine. Now a lot of people don't want it. Should have never been a mandate. That should have never happened. You should have been given choice, as we say. We want choice in education, and we want a choice there too. And that should have never happened.
So now this plan has been fully exposed to not just America, but to the world, because you don't have all these dissidents that would have been rounded up and disappeared. Everyone's been able to be vocal. And even though we were censored on social media, Trump created the new social media. He created True Social. We had Elon Musk open up the reins of free speech on X. And so people have been able to speak out against this, and their plan has been fully exposed. Everyone was able to see what they did in China. Everyone's able to see what they did in Canada and Australia. You've seen the quarantine camps. We've seen the bills where they have involuntary quarantine on the docket. Everyone's already distrusting the media. It's woken up the entire country to what their agenda was. And now everyone knows about the Great Reset. Everyone knows about the New World Order. At least the majority of people do. And this is fully known and exposed.
You have this anti-system movement. What we are seeing is a revolution against the system.
The good news is the elites across the world trust each other more and more. So we can come together and design and do beautiful things together. The bad news is that in every single country they were polling, the majority of people trusted that elite less. So we can lead, but if people aren't following, we're not going to get to where we want to go.
Back then, I used to be so afraid to even speak about this above a hushed whisper, that now you have people like Trump standing in the way, exposing this on a grand level, that now it's encouraged. regular, ordinary citizens to get out and speak out against this, because you have enough of a populace and a critical mass that have awoken up to this, and they're going to resist and fight against this. So I would have never done it before because it was a really scary time. But now I'm out there. You have people like General Flynn encouraging people to get civically involved in their local communities. And I'm out there speaking at city council meetings against mandates, talking about how the vaccine is killing people. I told my chair of the board of supervisors, I confronted him about attending Davos World Economic Forum and being part of the Great Reset to bring the New World Order. It is all part of this moving forward to the Great Reset. And of course, Nathan, you're on the World Economic Forum, so you know all about that. You're supposed to take an oath to defend our Constitution. And one thing our Constitution makes clear is that our rights are given to us by God, not by government. And our rights are naturally we already have them. The Constitution secures those rights, and anything that goes against the Constitution is null and void. Nathan Fletcher is on the board of the World Economic Forum, and that's part of this Great Reset plan they have for us in the world. And he's working on behalf of foreign interests. He's not working on the benefit of the United States. So they know what's going on. I would have never done that in the past, but because these guys have paved the way, they've created an opportunity. It's the mass populace. We've woken up, and we have strength in numbers, and they can't stop all of us. And so now it's just the genie's out of the bottle. And people like to say maybe this was just a dry run and they're going to do it again. No way. Not only was this their big plan for one world government, but this was their big chance. Because as you saw in 2020, the people were dumb enough to go along with it. People put on the face diaper. They walked in the single file line. They stood 6 feet apart. They did all these ridiculous mandates, and they followed the rules. No one will ever follow it again. The whole world has woken up to this tyrannical agenda. It's now a normal conversation. No one will ever follow through this again. So they can't ever do it again. And they have completely exposed their hand. Now everyone's expecting them to do something like this, and they'll never be able to do it again. And that's why you see the cabal's big plan for world government has been destroyed. This was their big plan, and it's been destroyed. They've been planning this for decades. For decades they've been planning this. Since the early 1900s, they had plans talking about this, the vaccines, the population control, and it's been exposed. So they'll never be able to do this again. That's why you have them trying every other thing they can do with the border, with fentanyl, with train derailments and toxic. I mean, they're trying every single other thing they can do to try to break down and create chaos and civilization so they can try and bring us to the New World Order. But it's not going to happen because it's been exposed. And the other thing is that people say, oh, well, hey, we have the Second Amendment. We would have just defended ourselves if they tried to force it on us. That is exactly what they wanted. They wanted you to fight back because then they would have an excuse to detain you and carry you away and militarize police against you. And if you don't believe me that they had this plan, go look at what happened with the 2013 Boston Marathon bombing. There was a city, the greater Boston area, was put into martial law. And they had militarized police going down the street with tanks and automatic weapons, and they pulled people out of their house at gunpoint. We're talking grandmothers, women, children, pulled out of their house with the guns pointed to their heads by the police. And because they're looking for these so-called terrorists that probably, most likely didn't even do it because they saw another guy with an earpiece, but that's a whole other story. But they pulled people out of their house at gunpoint and with tanks and militarized police, and nobody did anything. It was a successful test of obedience. So what Trump did is he removed that option so that you didn't have to fight, you didn't have to hide, he stopped an inevitable civil war by rushing out vaccine. And hey, if you want it, take it. If you don't, then don't take it. Never forget, Trump gave you the ability to refuse the vaccine without having to hide, fight, or be carted to a quarantine camp and never heard from again.
Exactly.
We may wonder why President Trump hasn't spoken about the vaccine injuries. We must understand, however, that this would give a whole slew of counter-moves to the cabal. They would, for example, be quick to blame all vaccine injuries on Trump personally. Then they could also use the opportunity to recall the vaccines, faking millions of new so-called infections or cases, as they did during the pandemic, followed by new lockdowns all over again for years to come, until a so-called truly safe and effective vaccine would be FDA approved. That could then be enforced by police and the military without any choice for anyone. During those years of new lockdowns, they could still execute their plan of rounding up millions of unvaccinated people, and their new world order would become a horrific reality after all. So instead of talking about the vaccine injuries, Trump has announced an in-depth investigation
into the harms caused by Big Pharma. For this purpose, he has welcomed Robert F. Kennedy Jr. into his team to put a permanent end to the crimes of Big Pharma.
I will also continue my long record of standing up to Big Pharma by creating a special presidential commission to investigate what is causing the decades-long increase in childhood diseases, autoimmune disorders, autism, obesity, infertility, and other chronic health problems.
When Chad explained this on X, it was liked by Don Jr. In fact, President Trump has shared 18 of Chad's posts. Chad's paintings have been put on display during several large events with the sons of Trump and General Flynn. Recently, Chad gifted one of his artworks to President Trump, who had personally expressed great interest in them. You can also obtain a print of Chad's incredible art on his website.